My husband left me right before giving birth to attend his sister's lavish wedding. I ruined her marriage and exposed her lies.
I'm 35 years old and have been married for 7 years. My husband, Andrew, is 39. We have a 5-year-old daughter, and I'm currently 7 months pregnant. The main reason I'm writing here is because I just need someone to listen. My husband has always been close to his family, and when we were dating, it didn't bother me. His family was always nice to me, but shortly after the wedding, I realized he was really close to his mother and sister, like they had their own little club. It didn't affect our relationship as a couple, so I just rolled my eyes at their little clique and didn't pay much attention. At gatherings or parties, they usually sat together and criticized others. At first, they tried to include me in their gossip, but I'm not into idle talk, so I kept my distance. His mother and sister weren't particularly warm toward me and kept their distance. I did the same. I hate talking behind people's backs and then faking a smile in front of them. When I got pregnant with our first child, I stopped going to my mother-in-law's house. First, because I needed an excuse to distance myself. Second, because his mom and sister were toxic. Andrew was kind and caring, but God knows what happened when he was around his mother and sister. He would become a different person. As long as he was decent at home and attentive to me, I didn't care how he spent those 2 to 3 hours with them on weekends. I gave him that space. When our daughter, Sarah, turned 3, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law tried to turn her against me by saying, "Mommy is bad." But Sarah stood her ground. She cried and said, "Mommy is good." Then she came home and told me about it. Andrew laughed and said they were probably just teasing the little one. But I knew better. Since then, I never left my daughter alone with those nasty women again. Things started to go downhill last year when my sister-in-law began dating a wealthy businessman from Scotland. Naturally, she was thrilled, but I was surprised by how excited my husband was about it. For context, my father-in-law retired long ago and now lives in a rural area. I've only met him a few times, and, unlike the others, he doesn't tolerate nonsense. That's probably why he moved away, for peace. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law are unemployed and survive off rent from one of the family's apartments and an allowance from my father-in-law. Andrew also gives part of his salary to his mother. I've always been financially independent, so I never objected to Andrew helping his mom. Back to the point. Since my sister-in-law started dating that rich guy, her behavior completely changed, for the worse. She thought she was a princess. At family gatherings or events, she constantly flaunted the expensive gifts from her boyfriend. She took every opportunity to show off his wealth. Oddly enough, my mother-in-law was also on cloud 9. She giggled with her daughter like a teenager. Their behavior annoyed me, and it clearly showed on my face. It wasn't jealousy. Why would I be jealous? The issue was that because they lived on a tight budget, they had nothing to boast about before. But with this new romance, they both began subtly insulting me and accusing me of being jealous. Of course, they didn't say it to my face, but their gestures made it clear. And a few relatives confirmed my suspicions. Soon after that, I got pregnant again, and thank God it gave me another reason to stay away from them. Andrew insisted I let Sarah spend time with them, but Sarah refused. She's only 5, but already doesn't want anything to do with them. Some might accuse me of turning her against them, but believe me, kids have better instincts than adults. They feel the difference between love and fake affection. My first pregnancy was rough. I was on bed rest, and my mother-in-law and sister-in-law never once visited. This second pregnancy is easier, but now they often come by. Not to check on me, but to brag about new jewelry, designer clothes, or $1,000 handbags. My sister-in-law was obsessed with how rich her boyfriend was and kept talking about a grand wedding in Scotland. I just smiled politely and thought, good for you. A week ago, they suddenly visited. They started complimenting my cooking. My sister-in-law said she loved the apple pie and donuts I once made. Instead of being happy, I got suspicious. I asked why they suddenly remembered a dessert I made years ago. They were clearly caught off guard. She said she had been craving apple pie, but no restaurant made it like I did, so they wanted me to bake it. I thanked them and said I wasn't feeling well, and baking takes energy I can't afford during pregnancy with a little kid at home. They didn't want to take no for an answer and kept insisting. I finally said I'd try when I felt better. My sister-in-law hugged me for the first time since the wedding and said she wanted to pick it up on Sunday. I didn't ask why Sunday. I had no intention of baking anything. I said I'd try just to avoid drama. Midweek, I was so exhausted that I completely forgot the conversation. Friday night over dinner, Andrew said he'd be busy over the weekend because his sister was hosting a dinner for her boyfriend and his family on Sunday. I was shocked. Everything clicked. The sudden praise, the pie request, the Sunday deadline. Yes, I know I make the best apple pie, but that doesn't mean I want to fall into their trap. I told Andrew about their visit and request. He said the Scottish guests were dessert lovers and wanted to try an authentic American apple pie. Andrew almost let it slip that his sister bragged she could bake the world's best pie and promised to serve it. I was stunned. I told him I wasn't going to exhaust myself just so someone else could take credit for my work, especially when I wasn't even invited to the dinner. He said his mom figured I'd be uncomfortable around guests in my condition, so they decided not to invite me. Even if I give her the benefit of the doubt, which she doesn't deserve, why didn't they tell me this when they came asking for the dessert? Andrew just shrugged. On Saturday, Andrew went to pick up his dad and said he'd be back Sunday night after the dinner. Sure, I wanted to make a scene, but I chose peace of mind, knowing nothing I did would stop him from going. On Sunday, I turned off my phone and stayed in the room with Sarah. I assumed my in-laws tried calling me and left voicemails. I ignored them. It didn't feel great, knowing they were probably cursing me, but I was satisfied I didn't give in to their demands. On Monday morning, I turned on my phone. It was flooded with missed calls and voicemails, starting with polite requests and ending in curses. As soon as they saw I'd read their messages, my mother-in-law called. Oh boy, it was the longest monologue I've ever heard. I always knew she was fake, but that day I saw her true face. She blamed me for ruining their dinner and called me a witch. Apparently, they were so sure I'd bake the pie that they didn't prepare or order any dessert. My sister-in-law had planned to impress her guests by passing off my pie as her own. The Scottish sweet tooths left disappointed, and guess who got blamed for that? Me. While my mother-in-law spewed her hatred, I imagined their disappointed faces at the table. I thought, if it was that big a deal, why didn't they just order something from a restaurant? Sure, my sister-in-law bragged about her baking, but at least restaurant dessert would have saved them the embarrassment. But that's not my problem. I told my mother-in-law exactly that and hung up. Besides all their messages, there was one late text from Andrew saying he wouldn't be home that night and would return Monday after work. When Andrew came home Monday evening, he was quiet, but didn't seem angry. I tried to tell him what his mom had said, but he cut me off and said he didn't want to get involved.